Hi, guys. Good evening and welcome to the podcast. So, today's one is going to be a short one. We'll do kind of 12, 15 minutes kind of a thing, or 10 to 12 minutes. So, today, what I want to talk about is artificial sweeteners. Now, I spoke about this morning in a separate podcast, but I wanted to go through it again for my type 2 members. And it's relevant for weight loss as well. It's particularly relevant for type 2 diabetes. So, I'm going to talk through which sweeteners are good, which ones are bad, which ones you should definitely avoid at all costs, and everything in between. So before we start, if you haven't subscribed, just so you get notifications, the subscription button is over here, and the bell notification, you can click over this side. If you click that, that will alert you every time we go live, and you've probably seen that happen a second ago when it pops up on your phone. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Andy. I'm the clinical lead here at Ridicare, so the chief nerd, as my wife calls me. So let's get started. First of all, artificial sweeteners are separated into a couple of different categories, but for the most part, they're sweeteners that don't really elicit much of a blood sugar response and usually don't cause weight gain. So you have some natural sweeteners, and it's really interesting, actually. Sometimes people will say to me, oh, well, this is good for you because it's natural, therefore it's good for you. And they give an example of something like agave syrup or honey or something like that. And that is just not the case. If you look at the blood sugar response after honey, or how it's shuttled into your liver and causes fatty liver, it's not good for you. Is it better than sugar? Marginally, but not by a whole lot, to be honest. Both have their pros and their cons. So there are some sweeteners that people think are really good for you just because they're natural, but that's not the case at all. Now, the artificial sweeteners, the main ones, are things like, and I'll show you this on a graphic in a second, but things like xylitol, erythritol, stevia, aspartame. And there's one of those sweeteners that I'll come to in a minute that is definitely neurotoxic, so bad for your brain. It's potentially, excuse me, it's potentially a carcinogen as well. So there's been a lot of speculative papers written around whether it may or may not increase your risk of cancer. So let's take a look at those. Now, before we take a look at the sweeteners, actually, I just wanted to talk through a couple of really interesting studies. So some of the things we know about sweeteners, for the most part, they don't spike your blood sugar levels. So most sweeteners don't spike your blood sugar levels. Now, I did a test myself just as a sort of just because I'm interested in this sort of stuff. I wore a continuous glucose monitor. So just a little kind of a plastic button thing here that pricks you every couple of hours, and you scan it and it tells you your blood sugar levels. So I wore that for probably 5 or 6 weeks, and I checked all the different sweeteners. So the one that spiked my blood sugars a fair bit actually was xylitol, which is interesting because it doesn't spike some people's blood sugar levels. But there you go. Everyone is different, and there's a little bit of what they call intervariability. So xylitol, erythritol, and stevia are the ones that, with the exception of xylitol, erythritol, and stevia and monk fruit didn't spike my blood sugar levels at all. Aspartame definitely didn't spike my blood sugar levels, but that's got its own dangers, and we'll talk through that in a second. So we know that, and let me share this now for a second. So we know the ones on the right that definitely spike your blood sugar levels are white sugar and brown sugar. They're basically the same thing. So people say, well, brown sugar is much better for you. And then when you ask them to explain why, they just can't. So it's not actually. If you look at the glycemic index of white sugar and brown sugar, it's around 100, meaning that it'll really spike your blood sugar levels. High fructose corn syrup, so your full sugar cola or lemonade drink, a bit over 100. Fruit juice, over 100. Agave syrup, over 100. Honey, the same. Dates, the same. Coconut sugar. So sometimes people hear, oh, coconut sugar, that's not the same as normal sugar. No, but it's still sugar. Maple syrup, dextrose, malted dextrin, these are all hidden names for sugar. As a general rule of thumb, any word ending in OSE, os, like dextrose, maltose, sucralose, they're all sugar or sugar derivatives, so stay away from them. Maltitol, middle of the road, but I wouldn't advise it. Xylitol, 15, and then you're down to the likes of sucralose, dextrose, aspartame, what are the other ones? Saccharin, all of those. So saccharin and sucralose I would avoid for sure. And I'm not talking about the brand names here. I don't want to get in any trouble, but you'll see them there anyway in the yellow, blue, and pink on the left-hand side of the graphic. But I would definitely avoid sucralose and saccharin. But the one that I'd be most concerned with when I look at the clinical literature in terms of its neurotoxic effects and its carcinogenic, so causes cancer effects, is the one that's in almost everything diet. Anything that's called diet has it in it, and that's aspartame. So aspartame has been shown to disrupt your hormones. It's been shown to cause systemic inflammation and what's known as oxidative stress in the body, both very bad things which can lead to cancer and heart disease. It's thought to be a possible carcinogen. It's definitely a neurotoxin, so it's toxic to the brain and it can cross what's known as the blood-brain barrier and get into the brain and do damage. Yet it's in diet drinks, diet yogurts, fat-free products, protein bars. It's in baby food. It's in loads of things that you would think that just really shouldn't be allowed. So now the research has become more clear, but if you want to know the story as to how in the name of God we ended up, I say we collectively, but how it ended up that aspartame got approved to be used as a sweetener, just look up aspartame and Monsanto. They're the guys who would make the glyphosate kind of weed killer spray stuff as well, amongst other products. But Monsanto, basically, again, I don't want to get in trouble, but somebody threw an unbelievable amount of money towards the situation, and it got passed to be put in all sorts of foods, even though it was known at the time that it was particularly toxic to the human body. So I would definitely avoid aspartame, as I would avoid sucralose and saccharin. The ones that I believe are the best sweeteners are stevia, with a caveat that stevia just doesn't taste nice. Honestly, I don't get it. There are a couple of products with stevia in it that are okay, but stevia, generally speaking, gives a weird sort of a slightly bittery taste. Some people don't mind it. Personally, I can't stand it. My wife, for example, likes it. She says it's fine, doesn't bother in the slightest. So everyone's different. Monk fruit is good. Allulose is good. Allulose. That's not there, but it just came into my head. And erythritol is probably the best. So for me, if I'm baking or making it the odd time that I'm baking, but if I'm making anything at home, I'll use xylitol. My wife will sometimes use xylitol. And the reason we use xylitol is because you can swap it out gram for gram with sugar in a recipe. So if the recipe calls for 8 tablespoons of sugar, you can put in roughly 8 or 9 tablespoons of xylitol and you get the same taste with a way lower blood sugar response from it. So it's a really good substitute for cooking. That's why you see it in loads of cooking recipes. Xylitol, I find, gives that slightly strange, it's a fake sugar taste off it, but it's not bad. Monk fruit is great. Stevia is great. And all of those actually are less harmful, definitely. There's none of them are kind of a get out of jail card, but they're less harmful. The next thing I wanted to talk about actually is really, really interesting. So that is the fact that sweeteners cause weight gain. So sometimes people say, well, sugar causes a spike of insulin in the body. Insulin causes the body to put glucose into their cells, drives them into cells for energy, and it causes the body to store fat. So basically, if your blood sugar levels are high, your blood insulin levels or your serum insulin levels are high and you're gaining fat. That's why sugary things make you fat. So if we look at sweeteners and what they do in terms of insulin production, there's an amazing study that was done a couple of years ago with athletes where they take these athletes and they give them a kind of what do they call them? Energy gels, which are full of carbohydrate and sugar. And they look at their insulin levels and their insulin levels go up high, as you would expect, because that's what the human body is primed to do. And then they give them half an hour later, when that's washed out of the body, they give them a sugary tasting drink that they swish around their mouth and spit out. And that was a really clever part of the study. Because if they drank the sugary drink, they could say, oh, look, the artificial sweeteners caused the body to produce insulin. But it wasn't the sweeteners per se. It was the taste of something sweet. So when I first read this, I thought, well, that's kind of strange. So the taste of something sweet, it's not even sugar at all. It's aspartame or, sucralose or one of those things that has no actual sugar in it, cause the body to produce insulin and store fat. So it's an anticipatory mechanism, meaning that your body is anticipating that it should produce insulin. The taste of something sweet triggers the production of insulin, which can make you gain weight. So in most individuals, artificial sweeteners will absolutely make you gain weight. And that's a relatively new finding. We kind of thought it might be the case, but because you actually don't see all that much weight loss if people just swap out from a full sugar drink to a diet drink or something like that. So diet products will cause weight gain for sure. The other thing that's really interesting then is that sweeteners increase your sugar threshold. So when I mean your sweet taste or sugar taste threshold, I'm talking about your ability to taste something and go, yeah, that tastes a little bit sweeter. That's a little bit too sweet for me. And I remember going back about 8 or 9 years ago. I'm on a low carb or kind of a ketogenic type diet for maybe 5 or 6 years, I think. And I remember a couple of years before that thinking, someone would say to me, "Oh God, that's way too sweet." And I remember thinking there was no such thing as too sweet. I mean, I would and still would eat like the buttercream off a cupcake and still not think it's too sweet. Just go, it's amazing. But some people, I know my mom would taste something and go, "Oh God, that's awfully sweet." The less sugar you eat, the lower your threshold for that kind of bliss point, the point beyond which you say that's too much for me. If you consume artificial sweeteners all the time, you don't get a proper hit from sugary stuff when you do eat it. So you'll eat it and go, well, I need more and more and more of that. So your threshold goes up and up and up. And in that way, and a couple of other direct mechanisms behind this as well, artificial sweeteners cause sugar cravings. So when you eat something that is, let's say, for example, a fizzy drink, the reason we like those drinks, like the diet soda, I don't want to say a name, but the diet colas and the diet lemon and lime type drinks, is because your brain produces endorphins, which are the pleasure hormones associated with the sweet taste. So the fact that it's not actually sugar is irrelevant from a brain chemistry point of view. And it's also irrelevant from a insulin production point of view. So you're reinstating that addictive kind of pattern that says, I like something sugary and it makes me feel nice. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. I do have diet drinks a couple of times or artificially sweetened drinks a couple of times a week, at least probably 4 or 5 times a week. But just be aware that if you are trying to break the sugar addiction cycle or dependency on carbohydrate and sugar, the diet drinks will absolutely reinstate that behavior. The drink I had actually earlier on is, because I'm trying to move away from anything with aspartame in it, is I got it in a shop for any of our guys listening in Ireland. There's probably Holland and Barrett in the UK. I don't know off the top of my head, but the shop is Holland and Barrett, just a health shop. It's out. We were just out in Man Point with the kids. And they have these kind of stevia flavored drinks. So the fizzy drinks flavored with stevia. They have like lemon, orange, green cola is one of them as well, which is like a very similar to Coca-Cola tasting drink. They're really nice. They're lovely, especially the orange ones and the cherry flavor as well. They're really nice. And they're not that expensive, actually. Some of these kind of stevia drinks are very expensive. There's a company in the States called Zevia, Zevia. They're very popular in the kind of low carb whole food community, but they're expensive. But these ones are, I think, about €1, which is not too bad. Okay, so to wrap up on the better and worst sweeteners, the key kind of points here. First of all, sweeteners can definitely cause weight gain. So they're not a kind of a get out of jail card that you just, load up on sweeteners and make loads of desserts and make. I find actually the more sweeteners I have, the more artificially sweetened stuff I have, the more likely I am to eat real stuff, because it definitely reinstates that kind of sugar craving, which brings me nicely and accidentally onto my next point, which is sweeteners increase sugar cravings and the threshold beyond which you need to feel something is too sugary. So basically, they just build up your tolerance to sugary stuff, which is not a good thing. Your best sweeteners then are going to be stevia, which is the bittery kind of one, erythritol, which is quite nice. You'll get that in most places. You'll get that in Tesco, Super Value, Morrison's, Aldi, Lidl, all those sorts of places. If you can't or if you don't see it, just go to a health shop. You'll definitely get it there. Xylitol is the one that I would recommend most for cooking. So although it sounds unusual, it's derived from tree bark and it tastes, stevia is a plant as well. A lot of these are plants. Stevia is a plant. Erythritol is a cactus, I believe. Xylitol is the bark of a tree, and monk fruit obviously comes from monk fruit. Xylitol is particularly good for cooking. If you're going to cook, I would recommend xylitol for sure. It's great and it doesn't give that kind of strange aftertaste. And then the ones I would avoid like the plague would be saccharin, sucralose, and the most would be aspartame. And it's amazing. So the sweetener that we know is the most harmful to human health is the one that is in everything. So this is, I'm not pointing the finger at any brands and I'm not trying to get myself in trouble, but Diet Coke, 7-Up Free, Diet Fanta, Diet Club Orange, diet yogurts, fat-free yogurts, what's that stuff called as well? Cordial. So my Wadi, Ribena, sugar-free Ribena, all of those will have aspartame. Chewing gum, all of those will have aspartame in them. So if you see aspartame in something, as a general rule, try to avoid it. And that's difficult to do, I know, if you're picking up diet drinks, unless you get those stevia ones, which you'll get in some health shops. But that's the kind of the lowdown on sweeteners. So sweeteners are, to kind of sum up, they're the lesser of evils if you choose the better ones like xylitol, stevia, and those sort of things. I would definitely avoid aspartame if at all possible. You could even argue the case that it's not a whole lot better than sugar for a different set of reasons. It's neurotoxic. It causes leaky gut syndrome. It raises systemic inflammation. Sugar does all of those things as well. But it's up there with sugar. However, it won't spike your blood sugar levels. That's one thing I will say. So if you're diabetic and you're out and about and you haven't got the luxury of grabbing a stevia-based fizzy drink from your local health shop, then not the end of the world having the occasional diet drink. But I would be careful with them. So I hope that's been useful, guys. Thanks so much for joining me this evening. I kept this a short one just to kind of short and sweet, as they say, and keep it straight to the point. I'll be back again next week. We'll be doing the basics of type 2, so all of the ins and outs of what to choose and what to avoid, which is always handy as a kind of a refresher, and it's great for anyone starting. If you have any questions, you know where to contact us. We're at support@controldtx, D for Delta, T for Tommy, X for X-ray, controldtx.com. So it's support@controldtx.com. Don't forget to subscribe, click the bell notification, and we'll see you soon. Thanks again, and have a good evening. Bye-bye.